tell us when we need to be quiet. Okay, so
hello and welcome to a special Eyewitness News broadcast. We're live from Nazareth on YouTube as well as on 702's TikTok page. Remember, Eyewitness News also has a TikTok page. You can find it at Eyewitness News SA. My name is T.D. Madia, Associate Editor for Politics. As I said, we are at Nazareth. A very long slog, a really long waiting to hear from the ANC President delivering his political report, a very lengthy document at that. We come to you now at the end of the day. Not only has he now read the report, finally, but they've adjourned the day's program. We all prepared ourselves for a really long wait, a really long night. We expected constitutional amendments to be dealt with, credentials, a lengthy, difficult process that often lasts well into the night to take place. But none of those have taken place, let alone nominations. At least we're hoping for some excitement. None of that has taken place. They've adjourned the proceedings. They'll return tomorrow. But I am joined now by a couple of guests to unpack what came out of that political report and to make sense of day one of the ANC's 55th National Conference. Joining me now is Bungalwa, Editor-in-Chief at Eyewitness News, and Malaika Matlati, who is a researcher and an analyst. Thank you so much for joining me. I think it is strange that we didn't have the supporting the alliance members delivering a speech. You can put it down to maybe it was late, they ran out of time. The speech was delivered around 4 o'clock. On the program, the speech was meant to be at 9 o'clock. But also, when the speech was to be delivered, when the program finally opened, we had Wenzelu Zuma, a song, that haunts us as a country. It's been with us, I think, from beyond 2007, around that era. I heard it at some provincial conferences, and here it is yet again. Just your initial thoughts of what you saw. I don't think we're surprised to hear Wenzelu Zuma. I think we saw it coming, especially, I want to quickly add, based on what happened last night, where he went to registration and was welcomed with Ramaphosa, so that of course there'll be a rebuttal.
Sure.
What are your thoughts?
Look, I think the one thing is that Jacob Zuma, coming into this conference, already knew that he was coming here to fight. And already overnight, obviously, we already know that he had gone the route of a private prosecution, which if you look at it, at face value, it looks frivolous even to a person who's a layman. Now, coming back to the conference itself, obviously would have expected some excitement with nominations, the fights over credentials, the opening from the floor where they allow for the nominations from the floor. None of that has happened. But the reality is that it talks to the chaos that the ANC is. I think that they decided at some point that they need to start. Because you and I were arguing earlier whether they can start conference before all the delegates are inside. And as I was saying at the time, I think they can, because they need to save face. They're international guests here. They just need to at least kick off the conference while the registration happens behind the scenes. I do anticipate that we're going to have a long day tomorrow. But the good part is that at least we don't have to wait until late into the night, where we would have been called in around 10 or 11 p.m. to come in for the nominations. At least now, even though they're going to push back the program, they're going to do that around maybe late afternoon tomorrow. So at least on that score, it will be better. But I think I stand corrected here. But when I looked at the program, I actually saw the messages of support taking place sometime tomorrow. It is a bit odd, because ordinarily you normally have messages of support and from the alliance partners, and then the president open. But I do stand corrected. I think I saw in the program that they were meant to happen sometime tomorrow.
I want to make a bet that they actually don't want to hear from their alliance partners. Alliance partners have nothing
Pretty
nice
much.
to say about the ANC. Just a few months ago, Brother Mantashe was booed out of the Consultative Conference. So I have very different views. I think
well, the president was also chased away from Rustenburg.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
See, they don't necessarily want to hear from their alliance based on the things we've seen unfolding. Malaka, he delivered a political report, a lengthy document. Some said, where's the politics in the report? He's given us a state of the nation address. I make an argument that actually it's reflective of who Ramaphosa is. Ramaphosa has been criticized by some of being literally a dip-in as far as ANC processes and life is concerned, but more focused on governance, which I think is what South Africans want. But that's not how the ANC functions. And people want him to talk more about the party and where it's gone. What is your sense of what came out of the report?
So I think the report, as you correctly say, Tidi, is a reflection of who Ramaphosa is as a president, and as a president of the country and of the ANC. So Ramaphosa very often blurs the line between party and state. Very often blurs that line. And this demeanor that he has, it cuts across the board. When he's speaking, even in government or state functions, he speaks exactly as he spoke today. So I don't think Ramaphosa, and I think that's probably one of the greatest criticisms that a lot of delegates have raised about him, that he's not really in touch with the ordinary delegates of the ANC, right? That he tends to be very stately in his engagement, stately in his approach, and as a result needs to have other more, ANC leaders who are more in touch with the ground, your Gwede Mantashes and so on, being around him, protecting him and all of that. And you'll see that a lot, and we saw that a lot as well today, right? When delegates from various provinces, and particularly KwaZulu-Natal, stood up and started singing Wenzenu Zuma, and obviously Phala Phala Wenzenu Zuma and all of that, and that's a question meaning what has Zuma done? And it's, as you correctly say, this has been a song that has been sung in many conferences of the ANC, started, as you correctly say, in 2007 around the Jacob Zuma and Thabo Mbeki conflict and tensions and so on. So it's always been a song that wants to paint Zuma as a very sympathetic figure, right? Yeah, as a victim, as a sympathetic, there's a figure of pathos, and he's this sad guy that's being victimized and persecuted and so on. But you saw also then how Gwede Mantashe quickly took over that process, right? And started saying, security, come to the front, we're going to, and want to remove delegates and so on. And that's the role that Gwede Mantashe has played quite a lot. So I think that has allowed Ramaphosa to not have to be compelled to be an ANC president, because there's other people who are doing that, engaging delegates on his behalf. And speaking on the issue of the alliance, as you correctly say, Tidi, I mean, we remember, of course, the incident with the NEC. It was not just, the booing in Rustenburg with the workers, but the NEC of the ANC was also, forced to basically leave the COSATU conference just a few months ago. And the SACP has also pronounced that this obviously does happen quite a lot, but they pronounced on the fact that, they don't think the ANC is on the right path, they don't think they'll support the ANC and so on. So the relations with the alliance are very shaky, and with Sanko as well, very shaky. And you see it as well in the political report that Ramaphosa delivered, because he says that there's a necessity for the reconfiguration of the alliance, right? And it's very telling that he thinks that the alliance must be reconfigured, because the alliance has always been, the ANC has always, and the alliance have always played a very kind of like integrated role. And to say that alliance must be reconfigured 2 years before the national conference, what does that even mean? And what does reconfiguring mean in this regard? Can
I say I call it the unconfigured rather alliance, because the talk has been there for a very long time.
Yeah.
Again, the alliance feeling like he also made promises that would make things better.
Yeah.
But I always said, look at the overall movement and say, well,
yes,
at some point you're an ABM, anything but in Mbeki. And you were told that Zuma would come in and resolve these issues and tensions. And then suddenly you're at ABC, and today you're at ABC. But so I want to speak about the speech. What is, again, your big takeaway? Because my biggest struggle is he does this interesting thing. It's a PR, it's a gimmick almost, where he will touch on the things. He'll speak about load shedding. He'll speak about the Reserve Bank and how, the issue of the shareholders must be addressed. But he won't tell us how far did he actually take this issue. He'll speak about ESCOM. I feel like he doesn't take us far enough in some of the issues that he touches on. For you, what stood out actually from the speech?
I think let's start with your account of how you saw the speech, being like a presidential government account for what happened over the past 5 years. I agree with that. But I think what he did in this speech was actually try to justify what happened over the past 5 years in terms of the resolutions that were taken in 2017. Because part of the criticism of President Ramaphosa is the fact that he has not implemented. That's partly part of the criticism. And I think that's also why he mentions the Reserve Bank, but pretty much says nothing. Because 2017, the 54th Congress takes a resolution to say that the Reserve Bank must be nationalized. So he mentions that today, but then he is quick to also mention the fact that that very conference had cautioned to say that that should not happen at the risk of destabilizing the currency, one, and two, it should not enrich any of the private shareholders in the Reserve Bank. So without explicitly saying it, what he's saying is that, in his own way, what he's effectively saying is that they have not been able to fulfill that resolution because of these outstanding issues. But also, the other important thing is that he has not been able to fight unemployment. He has not been able to grow the economy. That's why his speech is peppered with the state of the economy. He throws in COVID-19. He throws in the COVID-19. And he also speaks about the unrest. Yes, the unrest destabilized the country. And here's what he says about unemployment, because you can never see an ANC speech without growing. Remember Zuma, the 1 year, I think he spoke about creating 500 jobs, 500,000 jobs. And there was a Ramaphosa who came in and said he would create 3 million jobs. Now, if you listen, there was nothing about creating jobs. All he spoke about was creating a portal where 3 million people are registered. Now that doesn't tell us anything.
So
now
watered down.
it's not even watered down. The reality is that they've not been able to fulfill any of those promises. So I think for me, the speech was actually a Ramaphosa trying to explain what they did over the past 5 years. But I think the one thing that he actually spoke strongly about, and which most people had expected it to be the hallmark of his presidency, which is someone who is meant to be tumamina and fighting corruption. But he was quite strong, I must say, on fighting corruption and on state capture. I mean, I've heard parts of the hall at different intervals erupting either in, not in song, but actually ululating or clapping when he mentioned the fact that they'll be tough on corruption. And I think that's how he's trying to claw back and to try and cast those who oppose them as people who are, I would say, pro-corruption, for lack of a better word.
Holding the line as far as the fight of corruption is concerned. But there was something very interesting for me around the July unrest I want to talk about. So at some point it was an insurrection that was sitting over the country. And I watched the language also change slightly, you know, speaking about a counter-revolutionary event that took place. But I also then asked myself, when he said you cannot blame what happened on ANC factionalism. And I found it very difficult because the independent panel report says it grew really from differences that also come from here. What do you then make of that, Malika, where again, this is really just not true. Now you're lying to not only yourself, but all of us when the facts are on the table.
So Tidi, it's actually very interesting because it's one of the things that for me stood out. So two things, that especially about the July unrest, and as you correctly says, in his report he now says that it was an act of counter-revolution to destabilize our democracy and weaken the elected government, right? And he says that this is not a manifestation of factions in the ANC. And as you correctly say, we know now from the report that a lot of the things, a lot of blame was placed on the ANC. In fact, even the weaknesses of national security were the result of the infighting within the ANC, but the political interference of the ANC as well, right? So absolutely, that was a complete lie. But that was not the only lie that Ramaphosa said in his speech, actually.
There were more lies.
He made, no, there were quite a number of lies. So quite a number of lies. One of them was about, I mean, and I quote, he says, the ANC managed to arrest the decline of voter support, right, in the 2019 national elections and the national and provincial election and the 2021 local government elections. Blatantly untrue. Blatantly, absolutely untrue. That decline was not arrested at all, right? In fact, in 2016, the 2016 local government elections, the ANC had still had about six-ish of metro municipalities, and by the 2021 local government elections, the ANC has less than half. Everywhere else where it had, example, Nelson Mandela Bay was through a coalition government, right? And that was a metro that, and you've also got metros that it outright lost, like the city of Ekurhuleni, where it was governing in a coalition, and it completely lost that to the DA and so on. So even the idea that the president can so blatantly stand in front of delegates and in front of the country, really, and claim that since 2019, there's been an arrest in the support of the ANC. Just a week ago, we had by-elections across the country, in Mpumalanga, in KZN, in Ditsobotla. The ANC was absolutely obliterated. It's gone beyond hemorrhaging support now. It is absolutely, it's almost non-existent in some areas. And so for the president to say that, for me, and also the issue about the July unrest, to blatantly so blatantly be dishonest about what the panel finding were about this, but also a lot of analysis has been done about this, right? And the reflections on how this obviously was also a result of the structural inequalities that are so deeply embedded in our society, that are deepening, that are worsening, and so on. And he says nothing about that. And he instead wants to say, this is not about ANC factionalism and so on. I found that very dishonest, but it's quite other things as well.
It's as if to say that the report on the one we accepted. In fact, this is what he says. He says they accept the report, they're implementing the report, but he does not agree with the one key finding in that report as to the source of the unrest.
And this is
I
a
think
fundamental finding.
exactly,
Yeah.
which in effect cancels out everything else that he has
Yes,
said
absolutely.
And
about
it
this
says a lot
particular
about the
report.
actions you're taking
Yeah.
with your government
Exactly.
Yeah.
about addressing
Yeah,
the issues.
sure.
I'll be very interested to hear what the deliberations of the reports are, because as these reports are tabled, they're then deliberated over before they move forward from that. I'd be interested to hear what an ordinary ANC delegate thinks of those kind of issues. But the one thing that I think many would agree with Ramaphosa about, it might have been like a tiny segment of a speech about the state of the ANC and how they wanted to unify the organization, but that has not happened, with the differences could remain, including the NEC. I think people will be like, oh, as tiny a contribution as is made towards the state of the ANC, he might be spot on there. Just your takeaway around that.
Now, Sidi, you know, and everyone who has followed political speeches of ANC leaders or ANC documents will always tell you that the ANC never misses. They know what the problem is. The ANC has never failed to diagnose its problems and to say what is wrong with the party. So to say that he had tried to unify, I don't think for me is helpful. The key thing is that when Ramaphosa stood here on the 21st of December 2017, closing that conference, he spoke of a united ANC, of an ANC that was meant to have defied its critics, which was supposed to have defied factions in electing a leadership that was meant to be a blended leadership that is not beholden to any factional interests. But that very admission by him at this conference, for me, is equally an admission of his failure as a leader to unite that very party. Because never in the history of the ANC, at least since I've been alive, and it's been a number of years,
Tell us your old, smooth, tell us your old, yeah.
I've never seen an ANC president who's so incapable of controlling the party or exerting his authority. And I'm not talking about dictatorship, just the ability to cohesively drive and to lead the party. This is a party where ministers speak out of 10. Now, yesterday, just on the ESCOM issue, Pravin Gordhan chastises Gwedemandashe. Gwedemandashe chastises a few days ago, of course, Tirete, and by extension, Pravin Gordhan. Lindiswe Sisulu is pulling off in a different direction. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma is doing her own thing. Begicele is saying his own. So it's like what the chaos that you see in the NEC extends to his cabinet. Now, you cannot look at all of that and isolate and remove Ramaphosa from that. It actually is a reflection of his leadership.
I'm going to leave today's analysis at that. It's a very hard thing to try and counter because, as you said, we are watching these things unfolding as far as his leadership. So I want to stick around with you a little bit. The reading I have of the adjournment today is that the numbers are not numbering. It is very nice and wonderful for a conference to come together and deal with issues that should affect South Africans every day. They should be worried about the way forward and trying to actually solidify a vision about who they want to be. However, with an adjournment having happened now, they then risk coming back to not moving closer to dealing with any policy issues. They come back and are still bogged down in leadership when they return. I have a theory that today was actually adjourned, not because of the registration on the Monday, but because caucuses are not happy, because the numbers are not numbering. They're going to have a very long night of trying to figure out what to do. There'll be a lot of things, they call it the tools of trade. There'll be a lot of that happening. And by that, it's an underhanded bartering, horse trading, and the problem of money that the AC's always had. I'm very sure. It's not a laughing matter. I'm very sure that's part and parcel of what will be at play this evening. Having said that, what is your assessment about the way forward? What are your thoughts about the way forward? With an ANC that, again, has kind of suspended dealing with the issues as it continues going back and forth with skirmishes over leadership. They come and elect and go, is often what people say.
Look, I know that all of us, when we leave here, will be going home to sleep. We thank the ANC for that reprieve because we would have been here until the early hours of the morning. But as you are saying, yes, the factions will be meeting. When we wake up tomorrow, I wouldn't be surprised if you were to find that one province or the another or a particular region in a province has been swayed in a particular direction. So I'm sure that will be happening overnight. But I must think we must disabuse ourselves of this belief that conferences are still about issues, they're still about policy and such like. These conferences and if all the province conferences that you have covered and all the province conferences, Malaika, that you are equally aware of, elections come first, everything else follows. And this conference is no different. In fact, in the very program, in today's program, the first thing is obviously credentials, and then nominations, and then voting. And then when do the commission start, where they deliberate on the issues that would have come up in the July policy conference? Only tomorrow or thereabouts. But now that we've had only one item on the agenda today, which is the president's political report, you can expect that on the 20th, the ANC is going to finish, because one, they do not have money to rent this place for another day or to accommodate delegates for a day longer. What that means is that what will suffer will be those policy deliberations and outcomes. But one thing for sure, we'll walk out of this place with a new ANC leadership. Now that tells you where the interest lies.
And in fact, Sbu, you're not wrong, because if you remember, for example, with Ekurhuleni, the regional conferences that set just before the provincial conferences on the way. Yes, so and it became so it was a long conference, but so there was a conference this one weekend, but only 2 weeks later did they reconvene again to discuss issues. 2 weeks later, after leadership has been elected, only 2 weeks later does that conference sit again, and Gauteng did the same thing exactly.
So
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. But like earlier, you and I had a conversation. I tried to ask you to call the conference. I said I can't call this conference. In a word or two, what happens next with these leaders who come here just to elect leadership?
Look,
Where's the crystal ball?
Yes, you must look at the crystal ball.
I don't think, and I think anyone.
You watch what happened in plenary. What's your take on the way forward?
Look, I'm still saying I don't think anyone is going to call conference. But I think Sbu is very correct that today, tonight, and I actually suspect, Sbu, that you are going to have leaders, as you correctly say, not only will they not be sleeping, but they're going to be watching their delegates like a hawk. Because obviously what happens at ANC conferences is that on the day when delegates arrive, they do what they call a head count. Yes. And that's to say a caucus calls its own supporters. So the caucus of Zwelim Kize, his chief lobbyists, will call their own supporters and do a head count. And that's how they determine how many people are going to be supporting them. But in this conference, you see shifts all the time. So this ongoing negotiation also changes the number of headcounts and all of that.
We've all failed to highlight how fractured these caucuses have been.
Absolutely. No, absolutely.
Have been so dismal.
Absolutely.
And I'm not sure if it's the intervention of the electoral committee or just the fact that we are in the middle of a slump as a people or the party. I'm not too sure. But I'm going to leave it at that. We'll be coming to you quite regularly tomorrow. We're very much grateful. So you can tune in tomorrow again for updates from Eyewitness News. Remember, I said we are on TikTok, Eyewitness News SA. You can catch us there for more updates.